Do you believe people can really change? Or do they just get better at hiding things?
You ever have a moment you replay in your head years later, even though everyone around you acted like it was nothing? I do. It was the middle of my senior year, and honestly, I wasn't even thinking about college or grades or the future. I was just trying to get through the day without drawing attention to myself. I wasn't the loud kid. I wasn't the one who talked back or stirred the pot. I stayed in line. I smiled when I was supposed to. And still, somehow, that made me a target. Mr. Halverson wasn't one of those creepy teachers that people warned you about. He didn't stand too close or touch anyone. He didn't do anything that would show up in a report or sound bad in an email. That's what made it worse. He did things people could shrug off. And they did. The first time he said something, it was in front of the entire class. We were doing presentations on career paths, one of those assignments where you pick something from a list and pretend you've got it all figured out. I chose psychology. And when I got up to speak, he interrupted me before I even started and said, "Of course you picked that. Girls, like you always do. You're used to people opening up to you, aren't you?" There was this weird laugh around the room, but it wasn't the funny kind. It was that awkward, uncomfortable kind that happens when people aren't sure if they're supposed to laugh or cringe. I froze. I laughed a little too, just so no one would think I was being uptight. That moment, that one dumb sentence, stuck with me longer than anything else he said all year. But it didn't stop there. He'd do it again. Not every day. Not always in the same way. But little comments. Sarcastic smiles. Making me read things out loud that had suggestive phrasing. Asking questions that weren't appropriate, but not quite enough to raise a red flag. And he always made sure it looked like I was overreacting if I said anything. Because to everyone else, it was just banter. Just jokes. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. I thought maybe I was making too much of it. I thought maybe it was in my head. Jenna didn't. She's been my best friend since 6th grade. She doesn't let things slide. And when she saw the way I started shrinking in that class, when I stopped raising my hand, stopped speaking up, and basically tried to disappear, she asked me what was going on. I told her to drop it. She didn't. One afternoon, we stayed late after school for yearbook stuff. Jenna went to the office and asked to speak with Principal Keene. She told him she was worried about how Mr. Halverson treated students, and specifically how he was treating me. Do you want to know what the principal said to her? He laughed. Not the polite kind. He actually leaned back, smirked, and said, "You girls are always creating problems that aren't there. Let's not make a mountain out of a misunderstanding." That was the moment I stopped being confused and started being angry. Jenna walked out of that office fuming. I had never seen her like that. She told me right away, and for a second, I still doubted myself, like maybe I really had overreacted. But then I remembered all the times I walked out of that classroom with my skin crawling and a smile pasted on my face because I thought I had no right to complain. I remembered the look in Mr. Halverson's eyes when he made his comments, that smug satisfaction, like he knew no one would ever call him out. So we did. We went back the next day. Both of us. Jenna brought up the same concerns again. This time, I was with her. I told Keene exactly what had happened. Word for word. And he stared at me like I was a child making up a story to get attention. He said something like, "I've known Mr. Halverson for over 15 years, and he's one of our most respected faculty members. Let's be careful before we start throwing around accusations." That's when Jenna snapped. She asked him if he wanted proof. He crossed his arms and said, "Unless you've got a recording, this conversation is over." So we made a plan. Because the conversation might have been over for him, but for us, it had just started. And by the time it was finished, Principal Keene would be the one giving explanations. Next episode? That's when we gave him the recording he asked for and watched the smile drop from his face. I don't think I fully understood how deep it went until that second meeting. The first time, I could still convince myself it was just ignorance, that maybe the principal didn't know how to handle these kinds of things, that maybe he genuinely thought we were being dramatic. But after the second meeting, I stopped giving him that benefit of the doubt. Jenna and I didn't rush into anything. We talked it through, tried to figure out what would actually make someone like Keene take us seriously. We weren't interested in some big explosion. We just wanted it to stop. We wanted to be heard, to be taken seriously, not talked down to like we were making up stories for attention. So Jenna started documenting things. She'd always been a step ahead when it came to stuff like this. She didn't just walk around with her phone out. She was smart. She started keeping notes. Times. Dates. Specific comments. I didn't even know she had been doing it until she showed me the list one day during lunch. And I swear, reading it all written down like that, back to back to back, it hit me harder than when I'd actually lived it. When it was happening in real time, it was easy to minimize. One comment here. A weird smirk there. But when you see it all lined up, when you read it like a script of someone chipping away at you, it suddenly becomes obvious how calculated it actually was. And then came the recording. It was nothing explosive. No screaming. No slurs. Just Mr. Halverson doing what he did best, playing innocent while making you feel like you were the problem. It was a moment during class when he joked about how I was always late with assignments and said, maybe if you spent less time worrying about your appearance and more time using that brain, you wouldn't be barely passing. He said it right after handing back my test, which I had passed with a 93, by the way. The class laughed. I stayed quiet. The mic in Jenna's sleeve picked up everything, the words, the tone, even the way he dragged out the word brain like he was bored and annoyed at the same time. So we brought that to Keen. We booked a time through his assistant, showed up with the printout of the notes and a copy of the audio file, and sat down across from him like two kids trying to get out of detention. We didn't posture. We didn't cry. Jenna hit play on the clip and sat back. He listened to the whole thing without blinking. Then he paused, leaned back, and gave us this look, like he was just tired of all of it. And then he said, "This doesn't prove anything." I asked him, "Did you not just hear what he said to me?" And he replied, "It sounded like a joke. Maybe not a good one, but still a joke. You're twisting this into something it's not." Jenna said, "We've got more. We can bring in others." And that's when he stopped pretending to be neutral. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and said, "Girls who make trouble for teachers they don't like usually regret it. Not everyone who gets suspended has someone willing to clean up the mess for them." That was the moment I realized we were never going to win this the normal way. We left his office that day with no resolution, no plan, and absolutely no trust in any adult at that school. Jenna didn't even speak for the first few minutes after we left. She just stared ahead like she was trying to figure out whether to cry or punch something. And then, right there in the hallway, her phone buzzed. She looked at it, read the message, and handed it to me. It was from the school. She had been suspended for inappropriate conduct directed at faculty. No warning. No conversation. Just a punishment. They didn't even bother to make up a convincing excuse. They just wanted her quiet. Wanted us both to disappear before we made more noise. I'll be honest, I almost gave up right then. My parents had already been pressuring me to stop talking about it, especially after that first meeting. They said I should focus on my future and not stir things up right before college decisions came in. They said Jenna was probably just overreacting and dragging me into it because she felt protective. And I started to believe them, not because they were right, but because it was easier to stop fighting than to keep being told I was wrong. Jenna stayed home for those 3 days. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't know what to say, and I was ashamed of how fast I had folded. But she didn't. Not even close. Because on the 4th day, she came back with something I didn't expect, a folder full of things that made our fight look like just the tip of the iceberg. And when she dropped it on my desk and said, "I think we need to go bigger," I knew exactly what she meant. We were done playing by their rules. I didn't expect silence to feel like betrayal, but that's exactly what it felt like when I didn't hear from Jenna after her suspension. And the worst part was, it wasn't her who went silent, it was me. I kept waiting for her to text, to call, to show up and pull me back into the fight, but I was the one who disappeared. I convinced myself I needed space. I told myself I was overwhelmed. But deep down, I think I just didn't want to admit how scared I was. It's easy to believe in justice until the people who are supposed to deliver it look you in the face and threaten you for even asking. It's easy to think you'll stand up for what's right until you see what standing up really costs. And in those few days, I started folding into myself. I stayed quiet in class. I stopped raising my hand. I walked the halls like I was just trying to survive something invisible. Mr. Halverson didn't say anything after Jenna got suspended. He didn't need to. That smug silence was louder than anything he could have said. I think he assumed the job was done, that I had been neutralized, isolated, and discredited just enough that no one would believe anything else I said. And to be fair, he wasn't wrong. People stopped talking to me. Teachers avoided eye contact. One girl even whispered to someone that I had a meltdown and accused a teacher for attention. And then there was Keen. He didn't call me in. He didn't say anything at all. It was like I had never walked into his office. Like none of it happened. It all started to feel unreal, like I had imagined the whole thing. And I think that's what made it so effective. They didn't have to expel us. They didn't need to shout or threaten again. All they had to do was let it quietly fall apart. Let the silence do the rest. But Jenna wasn't done. The day she came back was the first time in my life I saw someone walk into a room with a plan that could actually change something. She didn't just come back angry. She came back organized. I remember she sat across from me in the cafeteria like it was any other day, and I could tell from the look on her face that she wasn't there to catch up. She dropped a folder onto the table, opened it without saying a word, and pushed it toward me. I started flipping through it, and my stomach actually turned. She had emails, not ours, not just notes, but real ones. From other students. From parents. From someone who used to teach at the school. She had written statements. One of them was from a girl who graduated 5 years earlier and said she had been sent home after accusing Mr. Halverson of saying inappropriate things. Another file was from a parent who remembered their daughter being counseled out of taking his class again after making a complaint. None of it was official. None of it was proof in the legal sense. But it was real. And it was a pattern. I looked at her, completely stunned, and asked her how she got all of it. She said she posted anonymously in a few alumni groups, reached out to people who had tagged the school in old posts, and simply asked if anyone had ever had a weird experience with a teacher named Halverson. She said, turns out, there's a lot of us. Most just didn't think it was worth saying out loud. And then she told me something I didn't expect. Her aunt was a civil rights attorney, and she had already talked to her. That changed everything. We weren't just a couple of girls complaining about a teacher anymore. We were witnesses. We were part of a larger pattern. We were people with documentation. And most importantly, we were not alone. Her aunt couldn't take the case formally, conflict of interest or something, but she gave Jenna a list of options. Agencies. State boards. Reporters who specialized in education and misconduct. Places to send the file without putting our names on it. Ways to keep the pressure off us and put it where it belonged. Jenna said we didn't need to go public to make it hurt. We just needed to make it undeniable. I sat there, holding the folder, and realized I hadn't even considered the possibility that we could actually win. Not just push back, not just survive, but actually win. She said, they think they buried it. But they didn't bury it deep enough. And I remember feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Not anger. Not fear. Just quiet, steady, focused power. We didn't tell anyone about what we were doing. Not even our parents. Especially not our parents. We just started building something that couldn't be ignored forever. Because if they wanted to play the long game, fine. We were going to finish it. And the next move, that was going to make everything we'd been through look like the warm-up. Next episode? That's when we started collecting the pieces for something that no principal, no teacher, and no reputation could survive. When people talk about revenge, they usually imagine it loud. Some kind of dramatic confrontation, yelling, maybe even someone getting fired on the spot. But that's not how it works when the people you're up against wear suits and hold titles. When they're the kind of men who've built entire careers around seeming respectable, you don't beat them by screaming. You beat them by building a case so solid they can't scream back without cracking their own armor. That was the plan. No more confrontations. No more trying to get anyone at the school to listen. Jenna and I had done that, and all it got us was a fake suspension, a ruined reputation, and the kind of silence that felt like being buried alive. So we started collecting. quietly, patiently, and with an absolutely clear goal to take Keene and Halverson down without ever giving them a chance to prepare a defense. Jenna's aunt laid it out like a blueprint. She said we didn't need to go to the media, not yet. What we needed was a clean, irrefutable report sent directly to the State Education Board and the Office of Civil Rights. Names, dates, documented retaliation, patterns of abuse, failures to report, every box checked. And if we could tie it to money, to funding, or anything that made the district vulnerable, even better. So we followed her advice. We filed anonymous FOIA requests, freedom of information, asking for any formal complaints against Halverson in the past 10 years. We asked for the outcomes of those complaints. Most came back marked as unsubstantiated or informal verbal warning issued, which basically meant nothing. But they proved something important, that complaints did exist. And once we had those, we reached out to the people behind them. Some didn't answer. Some said they didn't want to revisit it. But a few enough were still angry, still shaken. One woman in her 20s wrote back and said she had made a complaint her junior year after Halverson made comments about her body during a group project. She said Keene told her parents she had misinterpreted a joke and then threatened to remove her from extracurriculars if she kept pushing it. That same year, Halverson was nominated for a district award. We included her statement. Redacted, but detailed. Then came the part one didn't expect. Jenna found a girl who had dropped out halfway through senior year 5 years before us, and no one knew why. She wasn't in our yearbooks. No one talked about her. But Jenna tracked her down through an old-school newsletter article her mom had posted online. She reached out, carefully, and the girl answered. Turns out, she had also been targeted by Halverson. Worse than us. It started with comments and ended with a closed-door incident that never became a police matter because her parents accepted a settlement, a college scholarship donation, they called it, in exchange for silence and withdrawal. She didn't want to be named. But she gave us permission to use the story. We included every line, every quote, every decision that school made to keep Halverson in that classroom and keep kids like us out of the way. All of it went into the file. Chronologically, clearly, and coldly. We weren't trying to tell a dramatic story. We were building a weapon. And then we added one more piece. A week before we planned to send it out, the school posted a photo on their website, a shiny banner congratulating Mr. Halverson for being selected as the district's Educator of the Year. There he was, smiling, shaking hands with Keene. The caption called him a pillar of integrity and mentorship in our academic community. We screenshotted it, dated it, filed it under active institutional praise during ongoing pattern of abuse. Then we sent the entire thing. A secure email. Encrypted. No names attached. From an account that disappeared 30 minutes later. It went to 4 different places: the state board, the federal education complaint line, a nonprofit legal team Jenna's aunt had recommended, and one reporter who specialized in education scandals. And then we waited. We didn't talk about it. Not with each other. Not with anyone. We kept our heads down, graduated quietly, and moved on with our lives. It took months. We started college. Tried to forget. But every now and then, one of us would send the other a screenshot, a headline about investigations in nearby schools, a tweet about a reckoning in education. None of it was ours. Until one day it was. It didn't start with Keene. It started with budget inconsistencies. Someone had flagged the scholarship fund that supposedly helped at-risk seniors at our school. There were payouts that didn't add up. Letters sent with no paper trail. One journalist dug into it and found connections to past complaints. And then the call came. Jenna got it first, from someone she didn't recognize. A former student who'd seen the article and said, "Did you two send that?" We didn't answer. Because we didn't have to. Next episode? That's when Keene's perfect little kingdom collapsed under the weight of its own secrets, and we made sure he knew exactly who loosened the first brick. By the time the headlines finally caught up to the truth, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even waiting for it to happen. Life had moved on, at least on the surface. I was halfway through my second semester at college, buried in coursework and part-time shifts, trying to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life now that I was out of that school, out of that town, and out from under the weight of pretending everything was fine. But that weight never really leaves. It just gets quieter. Until it doesn't. It started with a push alert on my phone. Not from anyone I knew. Not from any source I followed. It just popped up in one of those news aggregators, a headline that stopped me cold. High school principal retires suddenly amid allegations of mishandling teacher misconduct. I didn't even open it at first. I just stared at the headline for a few seconds like my brain needed to catch up with my eyes. Then I clicked. The article was short, but it didn't have to be long. It said Principal Keene was stepping down effective immediately, citing personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. There was no official mention of Mr. Halverson. No mention of Jenna. No mention of me. But the article did reference an anonymous complaint sent to state authorities, which led to a quiet audit, followed by an internal investigation. And then I saw it. One line. One perfect line buried in the middle of the article. A source familiar with the inquiry confirmed that multiple student testimonies were corroborated through documentation and digital evidence submitted independently to 4 separate agencies. That was us. That was what we built. It hit me all at once, not just the satisfaction, but the sheer size of it. We had done something they never saw coming, and we had done it without making a scene. No viral video. No screaming confrontation. Just pressure. Quiet, steady pressure applied in exactly the right places until the cracks couldn't be ignored anymore. I called Jenna. She answered on the first ring, like she knew I'd be calling, like she'd seen it too. And all she said was, "Took them long enough." We didn't even say much after that. We didn't need to. Over the next few weeks, it started unraveling faster than I could have imagined. More stories came out. More people talked. Apparently, Keene had received formal complaints about Halverson for over a decade, at least 6 that were documented and dozens more that were ignored or dismissed in back rooms. Staff started speaking anonymously to reporters. Parents were furious. The school board held a private emergency meeting. The district issued one of those vague statements that says nothing but tries to sound responsible. And then came the biggest twist. The award that Halverson had been given Educator of the Year was revoked publicly by the district. They didn't just take it back quietly. They made a statement. They said, "In light of serious concerns and new information brought to our attention, we are rescinding the recognition previously awarded to Mr. Halverson." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not because it was satisfying, though it was, but because it proved something I'd been needing to believe for a long time, that no matter how protected someone thinks they are, the truth has weight. And if you're patient enough, precise enough, and unrelenting enough, it can still break through all the noise. Halverson wasn't arrested. There was no perp walk. There won't be a trial. But he resigned quietly from his position a few months later. No celebration. No farewell post. His name was scrubbed from the staff page like he'd never been there. And Keene? He left with a severance package and a no comment, but we know he didn't leave on his own terms. He left because the walls closed in. He left because someone finally pulled the right thread and the whole thing came undone. There was one last thing. I didn't tell anyone about it at the time. I wasn't sure what it meant. Still not sure, to be honest. A letter showed up at my parents' house. No return address. No name. Just a plain envelope, mailed to me, but with no signature. Inside was one sentence typed in the middle of the page. Funny how girls who create problems sometimes solve them too. I didn't need a signature. I didn't need a return address. I knew exactly who had sent it. And I also knew that it wasn't meant to scare me. It was meant to acknowledge something that someone like him could never say out loud. That we won. Not loudly. Not violently. But brilliantly. I never responded. I didn't need to. Because the truth is, I don't care if he regrets it. I don't care if he's angry or humiliated or just bitter that someone outplayed him. All I care about is this: he's not in power anymore. He doesn't get to decide what's real and what's not. He doesn't get to smirk while ruining someone's life. And he doesn't get to sleep easy knowing no one ever called him out. We did. Quietly. Completely. And without ever having to raise our voices. That was last year. Today, he's gone. And we're not.